Today I'm going to color grade Insta360 H-Pro 2 iLog footage in Davinci Resolve. But before I start, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by me because I am going to use my power grade that I sell for $10 to color grade today's footage. If you are interested, link is going to be down below. It will work with pretty much any camera as long as you can convert your camera's color space to Davinci with gamut intermediate. But unfortunately, it will only work with the studio version of Resolve because it is based on Filmic Creator. With that said, let's start. So here's the shot I'm going to be grading today. Now here are my project settings. I'm using Davinci with gamut intermediate for the timeline color space. And then for the output color space, I'm using Rec 709 Scene because I'm grading on a MacBook display. Now let me apply my power grade or Note 3. I'm gonna go in here, run my power grade, apply this. And now first thing I'm going to do is convert iLog to Davinci with gamut intermediate and then to Rec 709. And I'm going to use this input device transform node and output device transform node, or in my case, DRT. With the input device transform node, you'll usually put the color space of your camera in here and it will convert that to Davinci with gamut intermediate. And then the output device transform node will convert Davinci with gamut intermediate to Rec 709 gamma 2.4. But in this case, I'm using a custom DRT because in my opinion, it delivers significantly better results. This DRT is included with my power grade, by the way. Now, unfortunately, if you go to the IDT node in here, you won't find an option for iLog Insta360 footage. So you kind of have to improvise. The first option would be to set this to Rec 709 and then this also to Rec 709 and kind of improvise by adding a bit of contrast and saturation to somewhat make it look normal. But this is very inaccurate. The second option would be applying a node after the DRT and applying the official Insta360 iLog to Rec 709 LUT and basically grading between the IDT and DRT, but I feel like it is not mathematically correct, if you will. And now the option that I use actually is I apply a node before the IDT, before this input device transform, and then I put the LUT in here. So basically, I'm going from iLog to Rec 709. With IDT, it takes me from Rec 709 to Davinci with gamut intermediate, and then the DRT takes me from Davinci with gamut intermediate to Rec 709 gamma 2.4. Now, I'm not really sure if this is the most accurate and precise way to do all these conversions. If you know a better way, let us know down below. And of course, if you are not using the Davinci with gamut intermediate color space, you don't need to do any of this. You will just don't have this, and then you will have the official LUT in here, and basically you will grade underneath the LUT to maintain the widest dynamic range performance possible. Okay, with all of this said, now let's start with the actual grading. First thing I'm going to do is apply noise reduction. Even though I shot this with like ISO 100, I still feel like H-Pro 2 footage is really noisy even outside with a lot of light. Like check this out. As you can see, a lot of chromatic noise, a lot of like grain noise, if you will, and I shot this with ISO 100. So I'm gonna use this noise reduction node in here. Let me enable this. And as you can see already, it cleaned up something before, after, but we can go in here and further adjust everything. I would recommend focusing on the Luma Chroma in here and Luma Chroma in here and also the motion slider in here. Let's start with the temporal noise reduction. Usually what I do is I go to 100, see if it makes a difference, and it does make a difference, and then to 0. As you can see, it removes the grain noise, if you will, the Luma noise. And I'm gonna go up with this until I see it makes a difference, which is about here. Let's go like 22. And then let's do the same thing with the chroma noise. Let's go in here where there is more color. I'm gonna go down. Doesn't really make a big difference. Let's set it to 0. And now let's play with the motion in here. Let's set it to 0. It's gonna completely remove all the adjustments. And then I'm gonna go up until I see it makes a difference, which is about here. Let's go like 20 with this. And now I'm gonna do the same thing with the special noise reduction. Let's go with the Luma to 0, to 100. Definitely makes a difference. I'm gonna set this, let's see, yeah, to about 30. And now let's play with the chroma noise in here. Let's set it to 100. Definitely makes a difference. I can see it cleans up everything in here. This is 0, right? You can see the noise in here, the chromatic noise, and this is 100. So definitely makes a difference. Let's go now and basically find a sweet spot which is about here, I believe. Let's do like 45 with this. And let's do a before and after, before and after. As you can see, it looks significantly cleaner. And by default, I've set the cache for this node to on. So then Davinci Resolve basically will render this node and give you smoother playback performance. All right, next, because I lost a bit of sharpness by adding the noise reduction, it made the image a bit softer. I am going to add back some sharpness with this sharpen node in here. And by default, it will already apply some sharpness for you, as you can see. Just a little bit. Off, on, but I feel like I need a bit more. So I'm gonna go to this section in here, blur sharpen, and then by default, this radius slider in here is gonna be set to 0.45. And if you want to add more sharpness, I would recommend using the scaling slider in here. Basically, if you want more, you go up. If you want less, you go down. By default, it's gonna be set to 0.05, which is like a okay-ish spot, if you will. But I feel like I need a bit more sharpness with this. I'm gonna go up with this slider to about here, I believe. Let's do a before and after. Before and after looks significantly sharper. Let's just see if it doesn't look fake or what. I feel like it looks fantastic. Maybe it's a bit too much. I'm gonna decrease it by like 2 points, 0.2 points. Let's see it again. And I feel like it looks fantastic. All right, next I'm going to add a look with Filmic Creator and then basically grade everything underneath the look, because from my experience, it is significantly more efficient. And by default, I've already adjusted some settings with the Filmic Creator plugin. This is the before and after, so you will get by default some sort of a look. But if you want to slightly tweak it, you can go in here and then select the core look, if you will, like cinematic, Rochester, Akasaka, elated. Elated looks very nice. Vintage. I'm gonna select elated, and then I'm gonna leave everything as is and maybe add a bit of bleach bypass. Basically, it will add like contrast and also a black and white effect at the same time. It's gonna add a little bit of that, maybe like 0.175. Maybe it's a bit too strong, so I'm gonna reduce the theme look blend in here to like 0.55, and also I'm going to reduce the color blend in here to 0.55. And now let's do a before and after, before and after. Fantastic. All right, next I'm going to adjust the creative contrast, if you will, with this contrast node. And in here I've already locked the middle gray point for Davinci with Gamut Intermediate. And if you want to add more contrast, you will basically play with these points in here by going down with the shadows. Like so. I want to have a very contrasty and bitey image. And then also if you want to add more contrast in the highlights, you can go higher or you can go lower. I'm gonna lower it down to compress the highlights and make the shot a bit more filmic, if you will. Maybe something like this. Actually, it's a bit too much. Something like this. Here is a before and after, before and after. As you can see, it adds contrast to the most important areas of the frame without really affecting the exposure, which is basically what you want with creative contrast, if you will. And now I'm going to do basic color correction with these three nodes in here, adjusting the exposure, contrast, white balance, and saturation. Now, because I shot this with manual exposure and white balance settings, I don't really need to do much, which is why I would highly recommend using manual settings to get the best results possible. But still, I can, fine tweak it a little bit more. So first of all, let's start with exposure. I'm going to lower the exposure a little bit with the HDR wheels in here. More specifically, I'm going to use the global wheel. Just go down a little bit. It's a bit too bright for my eyes. Maybe something like this. And then also maybe I'm going to add a bit more contrast with the contrast slider in here. Something like this looks okay. And then now let's adjust the white balance. I'm only going to use the gain wheel in here to get the most photometric and accurate results when it comes to shifting the white balance. This image is a bit too yellow and also a bit too red at the same time. So I'm going to increase the blue color and decrease the red color. So as you can see, if I'm going to add more blue with the gain wheel, it's going to make the image a bit bluer. I just need like a little tweak. And then I'm going to subtract red to remove the warmth in the shot. Something like this, like a very minor tweak, but if I'm going to do like a before and after, before and after. As you can see, it cleaned up the shot a little bit. And now in here, I'm going to add subtractive saturation. I've set the color space of this node to HSV. I've disabled the channel 1 and channel 3. And with this, you'll be able to add saturation in a subtractive and filmic way, if you will. But you have to be very careful with this because you can add a lot of artifacts, especially with the 8-bit footage from the Ace Pro 2. So if I'm going to like add saturation with the gamma wheel in here and also the gain wheel, I just want to exaggerate this. Look at the artifacts you'll get. Look at these artifacts. Also in here, you'll get some artifacts. Obviously, you don't want to do it too much, especially with like 8-bit footage. So I'm going to apply very minor adjustment with this just to be as safe as possible with the 8-bit footage from the Ace Pro 2. Maybe something like this. And then a bit of saturation with the gain wheel. Just like so. Let's do before and after. It does like introduce a bit of artifacts in here, as you can see. But honestly, I can't really do too much about this because this is how it looks more or less out of camera. You already have these artifacts out of camera, and I believe it's because this camera can only shoot in 8-bit and not 10-bit. But regardless, let's move on. In here, I'm going to disable the skin softening effect. I am going to adjust specific hues in this frame, more specifically the blues with this building and also maybe the oranges in here. And I am going to use the color warper tool for this because it is by far the easiest and the most accurate tool to adjust specific hues in Davinci Resolve. So for example, if I want to tweak the blue color of this building, I'm just going to press and hold and I can just shift around the colors to whatever I want. And I feel like it was a bit too saturated, so I'm going to desaturate the color a bit. And also I'm going to push it more towards blue than teal, something like this. It's a very minor tweak, but if I'm going to do before and after, especially here, you will see how much cleaner it looks compared to what it was before. And maybe also I'm going to slightly increase the saturation with this red color in here. Let's try it. This is a bit too warm. Something like this. Before, after, before, after. I'm happy with this. I don't want to do a lot of tweaks to the hues because again, this is 8-bit footage, not as flexible in post-production. All right, next in here, I'm going to disable the skin hue and maybe I am going to add a bit of density. Basically, I'm just using the color slice density slider in here. And you also have to be very careful with this slider because it can introduce a lot of artifacts, as you can see. I'm just put it to 100%. And you'll see all these artifacts in here. So I'm just gonna set it to like 0.04 just to get a bit of this effect, like a dense color effect, if you will. And that's basically it. All right, next I'm going to enable this highlights node. And all I'm doing with this node basically is I'm using the highlights slider in here to like soften the highlights or brighten up the highlights, if you will. I recommend usually you would want to reduce the exposure on the highlights to make them more compressed and more filmic. By default, I think it's gonna be at -25, but you can go further if you want to. Like for this shot, I would go like -30, I believe. It is a before and after, before and after. A very minor tweak, but if I'm going to zoom in, here's a before and after, just makes the shot look a bit more even in terms of like exposure overall. Right, next, let's do some masking. Let's see if vignetting works. This is like a vignetting mask that you can use for your footage. This one is a bit too strong, so maybe I can dial it back with the gamma wheel in here. About -0.01. Let's see how it looks now. Honestly, I feel like I don't need vignetting for this shot, but I am going to target this area of the frame just to make it a bit less bright, if you will. And for that, I'm going to use this isolator node. It already has like a window applied. I'm going to make it bigger and just put it here in the corner, something like so. And I am going to invert this to only affect this inner area of the window. And then let's go to the color wheels and just slightly reduce the gamma. Let's go far. And then go back until it looks normal, which is about here. Like a very minor tweak, but let's do it before and after, just makes the shot again a bit more even in terms of like overall exposure. Right, next, I'm gonna go to this saturation clean node and I'm going to enable this. In here, basically, I've applied a little bit of a tweak to the saturation in the shadows and also in the highlights. So if you want to like clean up the saturation in the shadows and highlights, you can see this is the shadows. I can make them less saturated, the shadows, or more saturated. Usually you would want to desaturate the shadows to make it look a bit cleaner. I'm gonna set it to about 0.8 8 with the saturation in here. And you can do the same thing with the highlights, but it's only going to affect really bright highlights, like maybe this spot in here. Let me see. Yeah, it's barely noticeable, honestly. I'm just going to leave it at like 0.75 with the saturation. And now let's kind of do before and after. Definitely looks a bit cleaner in the shadows at least. Now also, if you want to add grain, you can apply this grain node in here and it's going to apply this grain. As you can see, I'm just using in here the basic grain tool from Davinci Resolve. I'm not going to use grain with this footage. And then as well, if you want to apply a split tone color effect, you can use this split FLC node to like create a split tone between shadows and highlights, or you can use the curve in here, which actually does look pretty good. And just select the curve. As you can see, it will look a bit intimidating, I guess, but then you can make it a bit bigger and you'll have to separate the red, green, blue and white channels, and you can just inject like a color to the shadows and highlights. And in here I've already like cleaned up, neutralized the middle gray point to keep middle gray as clean as possible. And let's do like a minor tweak. I'm going to like subtract a bit of red, introduce a bit more blue, if you will, to the shadows, just to make them a bit more tealish. Something like so. And then maybe I'm going to warm up the highlights a bit more. Something like so. Introduce a bit more green to make the highlights a bit more golden. And then a bit more red, just to balance it out. Something like this. If this looks intimidating for you, you can go to this split FLC node and achieve more or less the same effect, but with sliders. So you will adjust the hue of the shadows and highlights, and also the strength of the effect to each area, to the shadows or highlights. But personally, I prefer using the curves because it is significantly more accurate, and also you can neutralize the shadows to keep them clean. You can neutralize the highlights to keep them clean, and also you can neutralize the middle gray to keep the middle gray as clean as possible. And I feel like the results from here are a bit cleaner, if you will, but it is definitely too strong. So I'm gonna go in here and set the gain here a bit lower. This is at 100% more or less, and I'm gonna go down until it looks somewhat okay. Just about here, 0.2. And now let's do like a before and after, before and after. Looks fantastic in my personal opinion. And honestly, I feel like I'm done. You can also kind of play with the texture node in here to like play with textures, right? Just makes the overall over sharpened textures a bit softer, if you will. It usually works the best with like skin tones in the frame, but I'm not really going to use it for this shot. And honestly, I feel like I am done. Now, just as an example, I just want to show you how it looks on another shot from the Ace Pro 2. I'm just going to paste all the adjustments I've made with this shot to here. And as you can see, it already looks somewhat good. I'm not going to use this noise reduction node to keep it a bit faster, if you will. I'm going to slightly reduce the contrast. It is a bit too strong. Also the exposure, I am going to reduce a bit more, and maybe readjust the white balance slightly, make it a bit more blue and less red, or more red actually, something like so. And maybe we can reduce the highlights in here a bit more, because they are kind of distracting. And honestly, I am more or less done. I can do more tweaks, but as you can see, you create a look for one shot and then you copy paste, and then you like retweak the exposure, contrast and white balance per shot, if you will. So hopefully you find this video to be informative and useful. Hopefully you'll be able to get better color grade results with your Ace Pro 2 iLog footage. Make sure to check out my power grade down below. Again, it will work with pretty much any camera out there, and it's only $10, which I believe is a really fair price. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.